What? Sorry, I was still passed out from the news of the direct. Yeah, Meowser, just give me a minute and we will get started. Can you already set the camera? Well, let's get started. As with all the custom amiibos, we had to start with a nice boiling bath for our big bad. But with this we get the head with the collar, his belly and the shell separated. But we must still cut off some parts that are molded together, starting with the hands. Do be careful with these because they are very thick, so you have to take the cutting slow to avoid injuries. And especially if you're very young, we advise to let your parents take care of this step. After we'd cut the hands off, we did see that they're actually separate parts. So, when you're separating the amiibo, you can apparently take these off with some extra effort. But once we cut the hands off, we needed to cut off the tail since Meowser has a nice fluffy tail instead of the large lizard tail. And we didn't record it, but we've also cut off some of his toes to make some fluffier ones. Once all the parts have been cut off, we're drilling some holes into the cut off ends to glue some armature wire or just aluminium wire into these to use as a sturdy base for all the parts. Then we can start on the sculpting. For this project we actually got a new material that we're going to be using for our amiibos from now on. It's called Apoxie sculpt. This is a 2-part clay that you mix together in equal parts, and this will give you a nice soft clay that has a 3-hour working time. 2 to 3 hours after mixing, the clay will start to harden, and after 24 hours the clay will have completely hardened. This is the type of clay that we're going to be using for this project. With which we first started on the tail. Here we wrapped a snake of clay around the wire and smoothed the seam and the transition to the body with some water. We had already started on the belly, so this gave us a nice point to work towards. After the tail we made some round toes, but these were just getting damaged during the sculpting process, so we had to remove those for later. After this we started to make the claws, with a blob of clay to wrap around the wire of the palm, and then we made some small thick pieces of clay that we'll make the fingers out of. For these it's very important to make the ends nice and round and not pointed like the original ones. We also checked the fit of this nice little bottle because we're... Muna, I wanted to tell them that! But yeah. We're also making one of the fairies to put into this little jar to have Meowser hold it. But now we can get started on the real meat of the amiibo, the complete covering with the clay. To get the fur texture onto the amiibo that the other cat amiibo have, we first need to cover all of Bowser's skin with the epoxy clay. Try to keep it in frame, I know. Luckily there isn't much special to see, it's just a process of making some flat sheets of clay, laying these onto the amiibo and using some water to smooth out pieces that have already been laid out. The only special parts are around the neck where the head is going to be placed back, where we need to press the head into the clay to make sure the fit still works. And around the armbands with the spikes Bowser wears, since those don't really change between forms. After the body has had its whole coating, we can continue on with the other hand. Yeah, just a blob to wrap around the wire, 4 little cylinders for the fingers and rounding off the ends. Although for this one, instead of holding a jar, we're going to make it more into a claw up position. After the fingers are posed, we can add little balls that are going to be the little fluffy toes. Then finally we can use a sculpting knife to add the fur texture onto the whole body. After the whole body has been covered, we can check the fit of the head and the shell one more time, after which we can add the final details, with first the claws. For these we can use the point of an old pencil to make the holes into which the claws are going to be placed. As for the making of these claws, we can use some spheres and roll out one end to a point, and after placing it into the hole we can curve the end onto the inside of the foot or the hand. Then for the final detail we add the little foot pads onto the hands, using the end of a paintbrush to yet again make some holes for the pads to be placed into. Then it's the turn for the head. Again, we first had to cover the whole thing with a small layer of clay for the texture. And again, trying to keep it all of the bands and the color. But this time also trying to keep the clay to the front of the mouth and trying to keep it out of the eyes and the mouth. Then we can add the cat nose to Meowser and give him his cute big ears. And we continue with adding the extended cheeks onto the ends of the head, which will also need the texture. Then it's the turn for the whiskers so they don't get in the way of texturing. Just extend a little clay snake onto a point, cut it off, apply to the snout and roll back to a point to repeat. Then some touch-ups before checking the fit of everything on the Amiibo. Then before painting we wanted to add the head onto the Amiibo so we have a better point to hold on to, but you can also leave it off for an easier time painting and just put the head on a stick. But for now it looks more like Fury Bowser than Meowser, so let's give it some color. First, everything needs a white base coat for the best colors, starting with the shell. Especially with this custom we would recommend to not use coats that are too thick. This will fill in all the details that are already on the shell and for which we did so much effort to make into the rest of the figure. After we got the first layers onto the shell, we can continue onto the figure. This part of the painting process is still very easy since we're practically just covering the whole amiibo in a white base coat. The only thing to avoid is the inside of the mouth since we want to keep that the same color as the original.
Sure.
Then another coat for the shell. And even this little fairy has gotten a coat of white. So now we can start to add some color onto this figure with a very light blue for her hair and her dress, since we're making this fairy.
Buddy. Ew. Okay.
Following the light blue, we use a brighter blue for the base of the wings. And a skin color for her face and arms. Then we use a black as a base for the crown and the brooch. And also for the color of her eyes. Followed up by a small bit of brown as a shading for the mouth. Then we can add the gold over the black bases. And we finish off the eyes with a white spot and some more light blue for the jewel on the brooch. Then we can take her off our stick and put her inside the jar, and ta-da! We've captured one of the fairies! After 3 or 4 coats of white, we finally got far enough that we can start to add some real color onto his figure. We're starting again with the shell with its dark marine color. This one is made from some dark blue with some more black added. Again, we use thin coats to not remove precious detail. Also being really careful to not get it into the spikes, since the color of the rings and the spikes really need their white bases. Like the red we're applying next. 2 to 3 coats are painted onto the rings of the shell. Then we're going to do something a bit trickier. For the aging of the spikes, we're applying some brown to the bases of the spikes. Then using a wet, clean brush, we're brushing the brown onto the top of the spikes. If done correctly, this will create a transition from the base of the spikes where the dirt would have accumulated to the top of the spike that would have stayed cleaner. Then we can add some color onto the fur. For this we mix an orange with a little bit of brown. This was then applied over very specific spots onto the amiibo. With this color you can see that the belly stays mostly white while the back receives all the color. In times like these, reference sheets are very valuable. That's why it's important to do as much research as you can do before starting a project to get all the info you might need during the making process. After 3 coats of orange, we can make some light pink and apply this over the pads, being very careful to not get it onto the nice white claws. Then we mix the skin tone with a yellow and a bit of white to make the color of the snout of Meowser. While the snout dries, we can start on the brown stripes that are present on the fur of Meowser. These are a brown top of the tail with stripes along the rest of the tail, as well as the legs, arms and along the back. 2 to 3 coats should be enough to make them stand out nicely. Coming right up. Now that the snout is fully dried, we can go back with black to the nose and the whiskers. When those are painted, we can also use the black to give back the color to the armbands and the collar. But as you can see, it's sometimes more convenient to wait a bit if you don't want to spread around fresh paint all over your whole figure. So after the snout has dried again, we can go back to the armbands. After all of those have dried, we can continue with the spikes with a nice silver, to make them even nicer than the originals since they only had grey instead of the metallic coating. We're getting to the last colors with a nice bright red for the eyebrows and the tip of the hair. Finally, we add the eyes with a dark red, a pupil with black, and a white shimmer. To finish, we add some acrylic gloss sealer over the nose, the mouth and the eyes. Then we can remove the painter's tape around the base. And for the final assembly, we use some super glue to add the jar to Meowser's claw. And using hot glue, we secure the shell to his back. And with that, we can finally announce the Meowser custom amiibo done! Hey Creagears, Robert here, and we really hope you enjoyed this new custom amiibo. There were actually many more Bowser's Fury themed projects that we would like to have done, but it all felt a little bit too much out of our normal field of view. But if you really want to see those projects, leave a message about it down in the comments, and maybe we can go back to Bowser's Fury during the end of spring. But I think for now we have a bit more of a current subject we can focus on.
Whee!
For the next few videos we're going to be tackling some projects around Splatoon 3. So, I hope you guys are as excited as we are about these. As a final point, we do have the 400 subscriber milestone. For this we want to do a little giveaway. If you follow us from the start, you may remember our very first project on YouTube, the Salmon Run sign. For this giveaway we're going to be making our own very custom version of this and give one away to 3 lucky Creagears. So if you want to win one, you can apply to the Google form below, and we will also post updates on our social medias and WVD Discord server when the design is finished.
20!
But that's going to be all from us now. Keep those creative gears turning, and we will see you in the next video.